Dr. Kevin Connors, good evening, sir. How you doing?
I am doing terrific. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's awesome that you could be here. You're kicking off our first masterclass of 2023, and I guess this is number 8, which means that the more we do, the more we get feedback that people like them. So thank you for starting the year off with a bang.
Oh,
What we
good.
typically do in these conversations is I always call them education for education's sake. It's about getting good quality information out there for all the listeners who are mostly practitioners and some what I call health warriors and coaches. And how we typically start is I start by asking you what your story is. How is it you got from, being a young whippersnapper running around to sitting in front of the camera today? And I would love for you to tell that however you feel like in the context of your personal and professional story.
You were going to say, how have you gotten from a young whippersnapper to an old man
Hey
standing
man,
before a camera?
the head of hair that you got, I can't say anything but age, man. They're doing something right.
Well, um, my story is quite simple. I graduated in 1986 as a chiropractor. I always wanted to be a chiropractor since I was in junior high and got helped by a chiropractor. But the chiropractor that I went to did kinesiology and acupuncture, very holistically orientated, a lot of nutrition. And so I was a little dismayed going through chiropractic school that wasn't really a center point. So I had to learn that along the way, like a lot of chiropractors learning nutrition. You got kind of basics in school, but that's really not really functional application. So I learned that along the way over the years, and a lot of courses and a lot of education. But that's kind of been easy for me because that's kind of who I am. And probably a lot of listeners to this webinar the same way. Why would they be listening to a webinar? They've been in practice for 10, 20 years because they're hungry for knowledge. They're just hungry to help that other person that walks in, next person that walks in their office. And I've always taken that responsibility to be a practitioner, gravely, and that, okay, if God sends a person in my office, I feel like I got to do my best at least to figure out how to help them. So that has led me down a lot of different pathways, learning a lot of different things. And long story short, how my practice is now, it's very different than how I started. So got involved with using Rife technology, frequency technology, got involved with helping people with cancer diagnosis. And that's really what our focus is cancer. And now we just moved in the last 3-4 years to a completely distance type practice. We don't have even a place for people to come to anymore. Everything is online. Everything is via Zoom call, group Zoom call. We can see people from any state then, since we're not practicing, quote unquote. And so it's really evolved in the way that we're trying to help people. We have a lot of courses. I've written a lot of books, and we've turned those books into different courses for people, trying to help as many people as we possibly can. We have a lot of practitioners that joined our courses, trying to learn as much as they can to help people, and that's what we encourage.
That's incredible. I would like you to maybe expand right before we wrap up on maybe where some of those courses are able to be found in some of the books you've written. So if anyone, hears this and feels compelled to dive deeper, if they want to focus on what your specialty has been, we can at least point them in that direction.
Sure.
Thank you for that story. I do have a question, moving to an online model, which a lot of practitioners have over the last few years. How are you finding the acceptance in terms of your clients or your patients of that model? And are you finding things like the group calls and being able to see people across a greater scope of states is yielding greater outcomes for your business?
Well, we've been doing that for a long time. So it's just kind of become popular during the COVID years, right? Because doctors had to move to that type of model, but we were seeing people at a distance for a long time. Doing what we have been doing with the Rife technology and nutrition for cancer patients. We have a map in our office where we put pins. We have literally people from every continent that have been patients
Wow.
of yours. So we have shipped Rife machines to, I can't count how many countries. We actually stopped putting pins on the map about 2 years ago because it's just, and I don't say that to brag. I just say that's just kind of how God led this place. So
Hmm.
we have been doing distance work before we were kind of forced to. So the acceptance of that we've seen has been happiness from people who contact us because they didn't want to have to drive from Florida to Minnesota or Wisconsin. They didn't want to do that. So that when they found out we do things at a distance and we could do everything at a distance, they were happy. So it's we get patients that used to come in for testing that were local that weren't happy when we switched to complete distance, no in-office stuff a couple of years ago. But you're never gonna, no matter what decisions that you make in your practice, you're never gonna keep everybody happy. You got to make decisions based upon what you feel led to do, and be obedient to that. Not make decisions to try to please everybody, or you're going to be a failure.
Well said. Wisdom right there. And it's really encouraging to hear not only from myself, but I would imagine from everyone else. It's the formula that sounds like you kind of gave us the secret of is commit to something that you love, deeply learn it, become somewhat of a master in it, and then you can do it in any way, shape, or form because you've proven the concept for, years before it was a requirement based upon what the world did.
What you mentioned there is becoming a master, and somebody said that it takes 10,000 hours to learn something and really be good at it. There really isn't any shortcuts to
Mhm.
learning, a skill set. If you want to be good at nutrition, you have to put in the time, you have to put in the hours. It's just no getting around it. And I just have been blessed with a wife who understands that and gives me the time to study, and really blessed in the last 10 years with the type of practice that I've had. That back when I was doing chiropractic, I saw a lot of people. When you see a lot of people, you don't have any time. So, when my practice model really switched 10 years ago to we were seeing a lot less people, I had a lot more time to study. And, that's, some people, listeners here might be seeing, 30, 40, 50 people a day. And they're like, oh, it's easy for you to say. I don't have any time during the day to study. This is hard for me. And then I got 3 kids at home. I understand. But you just trying to make that commitment to try to figure out where you can squeeze in study time. So it's a skill set you just got to work on.
Thank you for that again. It's refreshing to hear that because in a world full of desired shortcuts and hacks that have become popular, there is no replacement for the old school methodologies. And you segued something so nicely. You mentioned, expertise in nutrition. I would love to ask you what your actual nutritional philosophy is, both personally and professionally.
Boy, that's a big question of nutritional philosophy.
Yeah, so let me refine it and make it a little bit more defined. When it comes to how you educate people or teach people about the core principles or foundations of nutrition, what are some guiding philosophies that you always impart to others?
Okay, so it might come as a surprise to some listeners that especially when you're dealing with cancer patients, um, that I tell our members of our practice that I don't want them to make their diet their God. I don't want them to. I mean, if you belong to Instagram or you look at Facebook and stuff, there's a lot of good nutritional gurus out there that are just very well educated and well skilled, that are really, really into nutrition, and they would never, touch a piece of sugar. They're doing a keto diet. Personally, I don't live that way. I don't ask my members to live that way. So when we recommend a dietary protocol for somebody who's stage 4 cancer, it still comes with a balance. I don't want people to think that if they ate a perfect diet, their disease would go away. Because I don't personally believe that that's true, nor do I personally believe that that's necessary. I believe diet is really important. So I don't belittle diet. I ask, all of our members that have a cancer diagnosis to go on a very low sugar diet. And then we get very specific. Most of them are going to be on a dairy-free diet. Most of them are going to be limiting a different level, depending on what's going on with that person's body and how we test them. Based upon our recommendations, they may limit red meat as well. But I don't want them to make it a religion. We are very clear about that. I believe that God created us to enjoy food, but not to be gluttonous. And I think it's really easy to flip either direction. You can make food be your God by being a glutton, but you can also make food be your God by becoming so rigid in your life that you don't have any enjoyment, and you are so you basically stole the ability to enjoy life because you're so rigid on your diet. We have patients that are in both camps. So we try to tell them to take more of a middle road. I mean, you've heard of the 90-10 principle. Try to eat best 90% of the time and don't be so rigid 10% of the time. I take that philosophy even with cancer patients, because a lot of people that come to us, the majority of people come to us are stage 4 already. They're, many of them have been given a time frame from their oncologist. Many of them are on palliative care, meaning that, hey, we're going to offer you chemotherapy, but it's not curative. It's only to give you a few more months. Many of them are taking it. Many of them are refusing it. And then they're seeking out care from us. I don't want them to think that being on such a strict diet is going to cure them, but I also don't want them to think that they shouldn't look at that and we have to maybe clean some things up. So from a philosophy as far as diet goes, I'm a little softer than a lot of maybe people out there that are, pushing very, very strict diets on cancer patients. And as far as nutritional supplementation goes, I may recommend less than some other practitioners out there that are quote unquote caring for patients with a cancer diagnosis, simply because I think too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. So there has to be that balance. So when you talk about philosophy, my philosophy is much softer than a lot of practitioners out there.
I think that's something that's worth kind of digging into, just because everyone in the health industry, likely if they become a professional, they've gone through their own health journey in some way, shape, and form. And I remember when I was in nutrition school, I was probably the most annoying person in the world to all my friends and family. You see someone eating something that you know a little bit about, you start telling them, no, you shouldn't eat that because of XYZ. And, if you have the right kind of client, the making diet dogmatic actually, in my opinion, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this, creates a stress in a different way that actually perpetuates their problem because of how stress impacts the entire scope of their physiology. Like, think about the anxiety of someone going out to a restaurant and seeing a little bit of cheese on their salad and they've been told that they can't have dairy. I think that actually makes a worse problem than sometimes going, you know what, screw it. I really enjoy a good piece of cheese. I'm going to enjoy it fully. I'm not going to guilt myself about it. But then tomorrow, I'm not going to give myself free rein to do it again, followed by the next day. What are your thoughts about that balance of knowingly indulging in something that you know is bad for you, but the benefits of accepting it for the enjoyment of the experience?
Well, you are exactly right there. When, I totally agree with the fact that we do need to have enjoyment in our life. And
Mhm.
if you understand the neurology, and we always talk about when we're talking about diet and nutrition and supplements, we're really talking about chemistry, right? So, what is a curcumin going to do to my cancer? How is that going to decrease inflammation? Here's all these studies that show that resveratrol is good for decreasing IL-6 and blah blah blah, right? All that is great chemistry, but so often as practitioners, even chiropractors, forget the neurology of detoxification, the neurology of what stimulates immune function. And, and really, it's the parasympathetic nervous system. And if
Yes.
you are stressed and you are anxious about, oh my gosh, I can't order that salmon on the menu that I'm going to the grocery store. How do I know if it's wild caught or not? Okay, yeah, that would be best if it's wild caught. If you're going to buy food in the grocery store, make better choices, right? But if you can't go out to eat with your family at an event and you can't eat anything and you're losing any enjoyment of that social interaction, your sympathetic nervous system is going up, your parasympathetic nervous system is going down. What that does to you neurologically, it decreases your liver's ability to detoxify. It decreases your immune system's ability to make T cells, and you're going to decrease an immune response against the cancer. All sorts of bad things happen when you stimulate the sympathetics and you decrease the parasympathetics. When you're talking about trying to get this person to heal, I mean, I've been taking care of people with cancer since the late 90s, and I can tell you how many people that have the people that do the worst have the highest level of anxiety. That is
Hmm.
just straight across the board. And um, and how do you get that anxiety level down? You have to calm them down. I probably spend more time on my Zoom calls telling people to calm down and go ahead and eat the hamburger than I have to do to tell them to be stricter on their diet. So, to have some enjoyment in life and to let go of what the oncologist said and forget about the CT scan and enjoy life. That is a big, huge piece of healing that so often is neglected in practice. We just forget about that because we think we got to be the practitioners and we got to lay down the line and we got to tell them how to eat and tell them how to do this and you have to do this. Well, we're just are we sometimes creating more anxiety for the person, and therefore our outcome is not going to be as good, meaning you increase that person's sympathetic nervous system, you're going to decrease their ability to heal.
I could not agree more. And I think it's wonderful you mentioned the overarching concept of the autonomic nervous system because as practitioners, I think we get so comfortable being in our silos that we become so specific, so focused, but we forget relativity in the concept of this whole thing is connected, this human organism. And anything that pushes you in the direction of stress and adaptability is going to push you away from health and recovery. And if that's a piece of cheesecake on the dinner plate that's going to give you a mild internal panic attack by the mere sight of it, it's actually not the problem of the food that you're eating. I think it's the relationship one has to food. And I would say that there's probably something in a bigger picture connection to that as to why they got sick in the first place.
Yeah, there is.
That's an incredible piece of wisdom you shared there. Thank you so much. So I would say, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. At one point when the processed food industry became kind of the go-to, I think the world's biggest problem when it comes to food was them not necessarily understanding that if you get away from Mother Nature and you make food choices that come in boxes or packages or preservatives rather with the food on shelves, that's a big problem. But would you say nowadays it's more so people's wanting to play for teams. Like you have team keto, you have team paleo, now you have the carnivores, you have the vegans. And what is it that people are aligning with and attaching onto and becoming so dogmatic with when it comes to food? What
Well,
do you think that is?
I think part of the problem is people in general want to be told what to do. They want to be part of a clan, part of a group, so that they can have an identity. It all gets back to identity, bottom line. I'm trying to give at least our members the identity that, from my perspective, they need to find their identity in Christ, not their identity in their diet, not their identity in even curing their disease. So, we're a very God-centered clinic, and people know that when they come to us. And most of our patients, are wanting more of that.
Mhm.
Uh, but that trying to get them to focus on what they should be focusing on, that's a big piece, I think, of my responsibility in what we call our ministry here. So is get them focused on the right thing so that they're not uh, they're full of anxiety, like we talked about, nor are they lacking hope. Because that's the biggest thing. When we're dealing with people with a very serious disease, most of them, like I said, have gotten very poor outcomes through standards of care. That's why they're seeking help through our clinic. And they have, a lot of their hope has been drained. And so we try to refocus them and to get them to be looking to the right source for their hope, and not towards anything else. And that's really our biggest challenge for most of our patients.
So it sounds like what you're saying is, some of the nutritional specifics or health specifics you give them are kind of for their biochemistry, as we talked about, but in a bigger picture of their guiding principles in life, you're trying to bring them back to themselves and something that is greater than that
Yes,
in your
we
own
think
very
that
specific way.
there's a place for chemistry, and of course, that's what we're doing with nutrition.
Mhm.
There's a place for diet, which affects chemistry as well. But even greater than that is what their focus is on, where they're, what the bigger picture in their life is, where their hope is placed, where their faith is placed. To me, that's much more important, not just for this world, but for the next. And we try to remind them of that all the time. We're dealing with people with very serious illness that many of them are uh, quite possibly going to pass away soon. We don't know when our time is, but they know their statistics, and so we try to get them correctly focused so that they have as much time as possible, and so that the time that they do have, again, I don't know if I'm going to get run over by a bus tomorrow. I don't want to spend my time, if I'm going to get run over by a bus tomorrow, how would you live your life the next 12 hours? That's how I want people to be focused um, all the time. How do you want to live your life, knowing that your time might be short? Should that be how we all live our life, even though we don't have a grave diagnosis? Probably. And I think there's a benefit to having a grave diagnosis, because it gives you the opportunity to refocus and go, boy, this is I need to change my focus on, maybe I've been doing some things that I need to rethink in my life. There is a benefit to having a diagnosis that can scare you. It can kind of scare you straight and get you to refocus on what's really important. And that's what I want my patients to do.
I think that's an incredible insight and something that's worth, I think, everyone who works with those who are chronically ill to understand, yes, today's goal is to talk about nutrition, but the clinical pearls that I always like to pull out of those who've been doing this for a long time, doing it successfully, are the things that you can only learn via the practice of health with clients. And I want to thank you for sharing that kind of stuff because it is a huge piece of the puzzle. If we could, I do want to kind of backtrack to something that I was curious about. So, in speaking about these people that you see, most of them are stage 4. Most of them have been given, you have a time frame that you might be here. What are some of the diet and lifestyle things that you have found these people have habitually engaged in that have gotten them to this point in their lives?
Um, I don't see. I mean, yes, there's a typical American diet. You could easily say, well, here's a stage 4 cancer patients because they've eaten the standard American diet for X amount of years. We have people like that, but the truth is, we have people that one of the biggest comments that I get is, I don't know why I have cancer. I've been eating organic for the last 25 years. I have been doing you could look at their life as a nutritionist and you go, oh my gosh, this person lives a cleaner life than I do. And quite honestly, a lot of my patients, when I do talk to them initially, it's like they have a cleaner diet than I have, which isn't saying a whole lot, but they live a cleaner life than I do, and they're taking a whole bunch of great nutrition already. Goodness sakes, they're not getting better. There's other pieces to the puzzle. So one of the biggest pieces to the puzzle that I think that when we talk about causes of cancer and serious diseases are things that even if you do eat a perfectly organic diet, you're taking a bunch of great supplements and you're doing a lot of great things that you can't get away from are the toxins that we're all exposed to, even if you're eating organic. We are exposed to so many poisons and pesticides and herbicides on a daily basis, even eating a perfect diet, that it just is beyond what our ancestors could ever imagine. And that is, I think, when we talk about cancer, you talk about cancer has a cause. Well, cancer is a cell that just starts going into rapid replication because something got inside that cell and affected the DNA of that cell. So it's causing this rapid replication, replicating cells that are in rapid replication, the same damaged DNA. Well, what is the cause of that? Something that got inside inside a single cell. It started with a single cell. Most of the time, it's some sort of toxin. So that's why I believe our cancer rates are going through the roof. Why I believe our cancer rates went from 1 in 21 Americans in 1971 to now 1 in 2.5 Americans in 2023. It's because we are living our life. Even if you're doing everything right, you're still exposed to a chemical factory, and our body just can't keep up with the detoxification process. So I don't think the blame is on the standard American diet. I think it's a conglomeration of a lot of things.
Do you have any insights as to what the most largely contributing toxins are in those contexts? Like where are people getting most exposed if it's not from food? Or is it from foods primarily, and then there are secondary and tertiary influences?
Well, remember, you're going to be poisoned anywhere that things can enter your body. So probably fastest way to poison yourself is to inject it, right? So there's obviously injectable toxins in these injectables that people have been injecting that will remain nameless. Second fastest way to get something into your bloodstream is through your lungs. It's actually faster than through your gut. Then your gut, then your skin. Well, your black shirt there probably wasn't dyed with blackberries. Those are chemicals that you're exposed to. The air that you're breathing, the carpet fibers that are gasifying, the paint that you're smelling. It could just go on and on and on. We're exposed to chemicals everywhere. Our diet, yes, that's a piece of it, but it's only a piece. If we had a really healthy gut barrier, you could eat seemingly some unhealthy things, you won't absorb them. It's what you absorb that becomes a problem. But there's just so many things that are damaging our body. So is there one thing? No, it's a conglomeration of different chemicals that we're exposed to.
You mentioned the magic word. You mentioned gut lining. Obviously, gut health is a big thing with us. And you also mentioned detoxification. Are those two of your important pillars when it comes to dealing with everyone who is going through your cancer treatment protocols?
Oh, for sure. Those are big things. That's why I ended up writing one of my latest books called The 7 Phases of Detoxification, where I go through, all practitioners listening understand, well, I remember phase 1 and phase 2, and maybe if I learned some functional medicine, phase 3 in the liver. But I was doing a talk once, and I was talking about, well, there's really more phases. Your gallbladder function, you could call that phase 4, and then you're in your gut and your ability to not absorb poisons back in, reabsorb poisons and binding those toxins so you don't reabsorb them. Let's call that phase 5. And then your ability to eliminate your toxins through bowel movements, that's phase 6. I mean, those are huge things for people. How many practitioners on this call have said, oh yeah, I've talked to people and say, are you constipated? No. Well, how often are you having a bowel movement? I have one, twice a week, like clockwork, It's like, okay, well, you have problems. But these are considered normal by a lot of people out there. So you have to be making sure that you're moving toxins, getting them out of the body, and you're not just reabsorbing them. And then I call phase 0, which is the 7th phase. Phase 0 is actually chelating stuff out of the tissue. So that's typically where people want to start. Oh, I want to do a detox. So I want to get a chelator and start, pulling heavy metals out of my cells. Well, if you have any blockage in phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3 or down to phase 6, you're just going to make yourself sicker. So detoxification is very important. So we go through the 7 phases of detox with all of our members and talk them through those things. And we work on those things concurrently often with the state of people that we see, and help them with that, getting that flow to be able to detoxify. And, then of course you're dealing with diet and nutrition to help them, hopefully lifestyle changes to reduce their level of toxic load.
That's incredible. I mean, I would love for us to talk a little bit more about the phases of detox and maybe some general concepts. Obviously, we're not talking about anyone in specific, but when it comes to you taking your patients through all the different phases, what does that look like besides obviously making dietary changes? Are there certain supplements that you're going to be using at certain phases? Are there certain adjunct therapies, something like a liver gallbladder flush, the use of an enema, a sauna? Like, how does that come together, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, pretty much everything you just said, but
Great, got
I think
lucky.
you have to start at the end. So you have to start on phase. The end for me is phase 6, making sure they're having proper bowel movements. So we do recommend coffee enemas for everybody, unless they have rectal cancer with a mass down there, obviously. But coffee enemas are not for the purpose of a bowel movement function, though that can be a side effect of a coffee enema. Truly, the main purpose of the coffee enema is to stimulate parasympathetic function. So again, parasympathetic function is what controls the rate of phase 1, phase 2 pathways in the liver. So parasympathetic function is the neurological control over detoxification. Parasympathetic function is the neurological control over the function of the nervous system. So I mentioned that already. So stimulating the parasympathetics through coffee enema, and then you get the side effect of, if you got a person that is semi-constipated, that will help. But working on, they have to be having good bowel movements, making sure that phase 6 is open. We put almost all of our members on a binder. And a binder, by my definition, is something typically that you're not absorbing, that it's just grabbing onto things into the colon and in the small intestine, so you're not reabsorbing it. And I like to talk in very simplistic terms. So I think of it like a cartoon. If your liver is doing a lot of work through phase 1, phase 2 pathways and grabbing toxins out of the blood, wrapping them up in a way that they can get out of the body, putting them in the bile to go to the gallbladder, to go to the small intestine, carry it out 30 feet of the small intestine and the large intestine, and then they're reabsorbing. And then they're going back into the bloodstream and they have to see the liver again. The liver's like going, what in the world is going on? I just got dealt with you 3 days ago. What are you doing back here again? And at least my patients can understand that simplistic language. So if you don't bind things in the gut so that they get into the toilet and don't reabsorb, especially when you're dealing with hormone-driven cancers, estrogens, bad estrogens are the most common thing that's reabsorbed in the last part of the colon. You have to bind those things so they end up in the toilet. And then gallbladder function is important. Now, we don't put a lot of people on a gallbladder flush just because of their level of health. I do believe that the coffee enemas help with gallbladder control and function.
Mhm.
And we do recommend castor oil packs and hot packs over the gallbladder on a daily basis as well. And then we support the phases of liver function. We look at genetics, and we look at the genetics of phase 1, phase 2, and bile production, and support those with different nutrition as well, before we start doing chelation stuff.
Got it. Yeah, that can be very beneficial or very detrimental depending on when and how. I remember when I was in nutrition school, one of my teachers worked at a health food store at one point in her life, and this man came in demanding a heavy metal detox kit, and she refused to sell one to him. So he went somewhere else and he bought one. The guy blacked out while driving his car and drove through an intersection and into a store window.
Oh my gosh.
Because and then that, of course, that's not the rule, that's the exception, but it just goes to show you that sometimes the best intentions can result in the worst actions. And
Yeah,
I think detox is one of those things that it should make someone who is well versed in functional medicine always pause and go, oh boy. Because if you don't have your t's crossed and your i's dotted when you undertake some sort of detoxing of someone else's body, you could actually be doing way more harm than benefit for that person.
that's right.
You mentioned, I wanted to just briefly intersperse this. Now, you mentioned you wrote a book or you've created a course surrounding detoxification. If people want to know more about where to find that, where can they?
So my book on detoxification is just called The Seven Phases of Detox. 7 Phases of Detoxification, I think. They can get it on our website. They can download, I think you can download the first chapter on our website. It's also on Amazon. They can buy the book. It's not a long book. It's very simplistically written. I think I try to write my books for patients that don't know a lot about nutrition. So that is available on our website. We have several courses available, and I created a course. So the reason why we started courses is that, again, I feel like my ministry is that if I learn something, okay, God gives me knowledge, I got to try to break it into the most simplistic pieces and teach people how to do that. I'm not going to be around here forever. So I like to write. So I wrote a book. Well, then my son-in-law who works for me said, we need to make a course out of this and really break it down and put videos together. So that's what I did. So that's what we did last year, made a 7 phase of detoxification course, where it has different modules and has a bunch of videos and a bunch of self-help stuff for people to work through those phases of detoxification. We did the same thing with my Stop Fighting Cancer and Start Treating the Cause book, did the same thing with my 3 Phases of Lyme book, and the same thing with our frequency healing course too.
Amazing. Well, for everyone listening, I'm sure at some point, if they need to, they can connect with your office or with you and reach out if they wish to learn more, because I definitely want to read your book. I'm going to take liberties being the host of this and saying, if you want to send a signed copy my way, I'll be
Oh,
totally
sure.
cool with that.
I don't think I'll sign it, but I'll send you a copy. You don't have
Oh,
to take
I
it.
do. Oh, okay, fine. Okay, I'll take the book. Signing would be better.
All right.
But
So,
thank you for
but
that.
but on our that's our website, Connor's Clinic, CONNERS Clinic.com, and you'll see books and courses up on top.
Awesome. You mentioned something previously that was a very interesting statement. You said that if you have a healthy gut that was sealed up, you could pretty much eat whatever you wanted and you would never absorb any of it. So
Well,
basically what you're saying is,
let's rephrase that. If I said that, it was wrong. If you ate things that you weren't supposed, that you have absorption sites for different nutrients. Okay,
sorry,
let's
I
use
meant
gluten as an
toxic
example.
material. Yes, go
Okay,
for it.
so people, the gluten sensitivity is just crazy right now, right?
Mhm.
But why? I mean, well, because they've changed the wheat, blah 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 blah, right? But really, gluten is a long chain protein. You can't absorb a long chain protein in your gut. You think of a long chain protein is a long chain of amino acids. Think of like a beaded necklace. a good way to describe it.
That's the
Your
example I always use.
Yeah. So your enzymes from your pancreas are supposed to break that down to individual amino acids or, two amino acids. That's about the size maximum that really is supposed to be able to cross the gut wall. But when peptides, these broken up proteins are able to cross the gut wall because you have a damaged gut wall, then you start to create antibodies against those peptides. So it is always starts with the damaged gut wall. And things are crossing that damaged gut wall that were never supposed to cross that damaged gut wall. So it's like if you put some bacteria on your skin, and you have a healthy skin border, it's not going to cross into the bloodstream and you're not going to get sick. You can go wash your hands and you're going to be fine. But if you have a cut on your skin and you put some bacteria on the cut, that bacteria is going to go into your bloodstream and you could get sick because you had a damaged barrier. Well, anybody listening to this call already understands that. So this is silly talk, but it all has to do with healing the gut. Now, I'm not so simplistic to think that as a practitioner, all we need to do is heal everybody's gut and then we're going to solve everybody's problem because of two things. Number one, they've had a damaged gut, so now they absorbed a lot of things that they never were supposed to absorb. So you got to deal with all that problem of poison in their system that's everywhere already. Secondly, I think as a practitioner, to think that you're going to put a person on some gut healing protocol and now you've reached this level of gut healing nirvana, I think you're naive, because we are exposed to things that are damaging our gut on a daily basis, even if you're eating organic. There's cross-contamination of GMOs that are damaging your gut. Probably our biggest gut damager that we're exposed to now is GMOs. And even if you're not eating any GMOs, you're still eating GMOs. So you're damaging your gut constantly. So gut healing protocol has to be literally never ending. You're constantly have to be working on healing your gut. Kind of like your spiritual life. You don't reach this nirvana and now you don't continue to work on your relationship with Jesus Christ. You're constantly working on that relationship. Kind of like a marriage. You didn't get married and you stop working on your relationship. You work on it on a daily basis or you're going to be soon divorced. It's the same thing with dealing with gut health and any other health and exercise. And it's just, you don't reach this point and you can stop. And that's one of the biggest things I think you have to convey to your patients. This is a never ending thing.
Yeah, the body, like a car or anything that deteriorates with use, needs upkeep. And I think that's something that everyone here would agree with, but it's the context of how to upkeep it, what to do. And I don't know if everyone on this call knows that you actually formulated Sun Spectrum. That was one of your brainchild passion projects. Was that with the notion of being part of that gut healing upkeep? Was that something that you were thinking about doing when that product idea came to you?
Oh, sure. I mean, that's why we formulated is for gut healing, right? So, and that is part of my 7 Phases of Detox book. That's one of the things that I recommend in our gut healing protocol. I guess we don't really have a gut healing protocol, but one of the things I recommend in phase that would really help with phase 6 and phase 5, because having the fiber in there, fiber is a binder. So it is helping bind things in the gut, having that fiber in there. It's decreasing inflammation. It's really helping with phase 1 and phase 2 with the CoQ10 as well. So there's a lot of benefits we put probably 90% of our members on Sun Spectrum. I just think it's a great all-around product. So not because I formulated it, but I think it's a great product. We've had good results with it.
And what are the things do you often, not always, but often layer in maybe from the Master Supplements US Enzymes portfolio that you find synergistically works really well with Sun Spectrum for your patients?
Well, I think digestive enzymes are super important. So even if let's take cancer out of the equation and you go back to the ground of, did this all start with gut health. Well, I don't think that's a truism, but that's at least a piece of everybody's illness is gut health. Um, and a decrease in hydrochloric acid production is a major beginning point. Because if you're eating food and you have a decreased hydrochloric acid because of increased sympathetic nervous system, decreased
Coming back to that.
parasympathetic nervous system, decreased function of hydrochloric acid production, increased H. pylori growth, and then you get food going into the small intestine, only partially digested, puts more strain on the pancreas. I read a study a couple of years ago that they compared the size of American pancreases, people's pancreases compared to, I don't know, I can't remember the study, it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it was considerably larger. And the thought process is that because of the amount of food that's consumed and the amount of extra stress that the pancreas is placed on in production of enzymes, and it's decreasing its ability to keep up with what's going on. Now, you could throw in there my comments of food being only partially digested because HCl is not up to snuff in the stomach, and then it's putting more stress on the pancreas. That could lead to increased issues with pancreatic cancer as well. And then you're getting food that's only partially digested, gets back to you have incomplete digestion of peptides and increasing an autoimmune issue with antibody production of peptides. I mean, it's just a whole negative cycle that goes on. All that to say, I think digestimes and HCl-zyme are another big product that we push for everybody. Those two things for sure. I think probiotics are important. We use probiotics with people. Sun Spectrum has some probiotics in there, but I think naive nutritionists think that you're just going to give a probiotic that's going to help heal the gut. It's much more complex than that.
Mhm. I agree. You echoed so many things that I've been speaking about over the last year. It's so much so that I created this thing called the Master Philosophy, which is like a non-specific way of knowing how to utilize the products in kind of like an order of operations. And I start with digestive enzymes and digestion because you said so many things regarding what happens if you have peptides trying to get into your bloodstream. That's an issue. What happens if you're not parasympathetic enough? That's an issue. Until you rectify the parasympathetic problem, digestion is always going to be a problem. But you have to rectify the digestive problem on the way to rectifying the parasympathetic problem. So I thank you for kind of reinforcing something that we've really been speaking about. And, each person is different. So I'm sure there are scenarios where the combination of a digestive enzyme, probiotic and the sun spectrum is a home run. And I'm sure there are scenarios where someone could only take one or two of those, but that's really, the nuance and the art of client practice, I would say.
And you do have to pick your battles as a practitioner too, and make sure that you're not using guilt and shame on a person, because that's affecting their emotions and affecting their parasympathetic sympathetic balance. You want to have a good relationship, and you want that person to have a good relationship with their disease, a good relationship with their body, a good relationship with their nutrition and their diet. Any that gets out of balance, it's going to affect that person's ability to heal.
It's wonderful you're saying these things because I believe that there are people who have been in the game, such as yourself and other people that I've spoken to for a long period of time, and you all have gone through every avenue of evolution with, I guess, advancement in your practice, and you all come back to the same philosophical core concepts, which I hear everyone echo of. It's more than just food. It's not how well you formulate a supplement protocol. It's not the gadgets you buy to help biohack or enhance the speed of recovery time. It's the fundamentals of dealing with a human, knowing how that person sees the world, understanding and having empathy for them, knowing what their emotional state is, knowing what their support system is like. And why I love that you're saying this is the whole goal of this is education for education's sake. And by reinforcing these things, I think it empowers everyone who may feel like they're not necessarily an expert on subject matter with the chemistry that we spoke about, but if you can find a way to connect to someone, if you can find a way to make that person feel supported and to help them become empowered to love themselves and want to do better for themselves, I think that's the key of long-term success in healing someone, or I should say in them healing themselves, because we don't do anything as practitioners. We're just along for the ride in the journey.
Well, I agree with you completely. And that's the thing that's that untouchable that you as a practitioner either have or you don't have. Now, I don't think that just because you don't have it that you can't attain that, but you have to have a love for people. You have to have a passion for what you're doing that goes beyond, hey, I want to make some money. Or I got a goal for a new car. I think people can sense that. I remember being at a seminar, speaking at a seminar, and being on stage with some other practitioners, and there was a Q&A thing going on, and it's a little embarrassing for me because people. One of the questions was, how do you set your goals in life and set your goals in practice? And the embarrassing part was, it's still embarrassing, I guess, in one sense, because I don't have goals. I don't set goals in practice. Um, that's I'm extremely driven. I've written 10, 11 books. I've, done more things in my life than most people would in 3 or 4 lifetimes. And I don't say that to brag, but I try to lead a life that is driven by my passions and my desires than by my goals. So that's not very Tony Robbins-ish, but it's I think that's patients can sense that, and that you're there because you care about them and you believe in what you're doing and you believe in them and their ability to heal. And I think if you don't have that as a practitioner, I think from a spiritual standpoint, you can ask for it, because I believe God puts the desires in your heart, and then you have to follow those desires that he puts in your heart. And when you're true to that, then he's going to bless you with whatever outcome that is. But it's hard to convey that to a young practitioner. But I think that's the key to really seeing success in your practice.
Yeah, it's a beautiful explanation because as a business owner, you have to walk the line between making money to feed yourself and your family. But you're bang on correct when people have an intelligence about them that allows them to see through things if you're not careful. And maybe the whole statement of not careful isn't the right way to describe it, but if you're not there to help someone as a health practitioner, you're not in the right industry. It's help people first. And I do believe, success and money and income comes from that because I'm with you. I'm someone who doesn't have specific goals for my practice. I'm not driven by numbers either. I like to help people. I like to be challenged. That sounds like you're the same way. And I think if you just stay in the purity of that, amazing things come your way because your intentions are pure.
Yeah.
Just stay true to also being a master of your craft. And you mentioned the 10,000-hour Malcolm Gladwell rule. I think 10,000 hours is just to prove whether if you're willing to commit to the process or not.
That's right.
That's like, oh, you're young Padawan, you've been granted to study Jedi now. So now the real work begins.
Right. Exactly.
Dr. Connors, this has been incredible. I mean, for the sake of time, I think I'm going to probably end it with asking you, if there's anything else that you're working on that could be a future forward project or anyone here who's wanting to connect with you in any way, shape, or form. I'd love to give you a few minutes to explain that, and we'll get to some Q&A at the end. I can promise no one's going to ask you your clinic goals in this Q&A, but we'll leave that for the end. So yeah, anything that you're working on or you feel compared to share with the audience.
Um, well, I'm always working on something. So we're working on new courses and new books and whatever God puts in my heart to do. I get obsessive when that happens. But it's, I guess I got nothing. I just want people to be be led by the spirit to do what they're supposed to do in life and then trust the outcome. That's the same thing that I tell my patients. It's like, okay, well, you gotta make decisions on what you're gonna do in life and what you're gonna follow, whether you're gonna do chemo, whether you're not gonna do chemo, whether you're gonna follow a nutritional protocol or you're not gonna follow it. I'm not gonna guilt you or shame you. That's a decision you have to make. And then you have to be prayed about that. And then you have to ultimately rest in that and trust the outcome. Doesn't mean that there's not work for you to do. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be difficult, but ultimately you have to trust the outcome.
Yeah, the area of life and working with critical care, stage 4 cancer or anything that's that serious in terms of life-threatening considerations, people are incredibly hopeful that you can be the salvation for them, but people have to trust that they themselves are the ones that are going to get them through that. So, I thank you for those final words of wisdom and for everything that you've shared. And I hope in these new projects, the new supplement might come into your head through your heart at some point, because Sun Spectrum is something that's, I'm sure, helping a lot of people who may be listening on this call and a lot of other people in clinical practice. So Dr. Connors, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your wisdom, sharing so much more than just nutrition, but also giving us your expertise in nutrition and all the related.
Absolutely.
At some point, we'll have to do this again because I do feel we kind of just got going. But in the interest of time and keeping it within the parameters of an hour, I think we did really good for the time we had.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much. So we'll hang on a minute and we'll thank everyone for attending. We'll be back next month focusing on sleep, so don't miss that. Thank you very much. And there's also an upcoming webinar focusing on sleep as the fitness factor, which will be February 8th, this coming week tomorrow, this coming Wednesday. So Dr. Connors, I wish you a great night. Stay warm up in Minnesota, and we'll talk to you soon.